Brett, do you ever think there'll be a union or anything for these wrestlers once they retire? I mean, if they got hurt, did they ever, you know, what did they get when they were hurt? If they got off for 2 months, now these guys get guarantees. Back then, if you got hurt, what happened?
Yeah, I don't know. I doubt you'll ever. I don't know that you'll ever see a union in wrestling. It's long overdue. I mean, they got unions for rodeo, they got unions for circus clowns, and everybody you can think of. But pro wrestlers got no pensions, no benefits. They don't get any percentage of the television revenue like football players do. You know, like I said, when their hips are shot and their backs are messed up and they're all injured and crippled up, nobody's there to help them. And there's nobody. Everyone feels bad, like Brian Adams, for example. Crush. You know, he ended up having a bunch of surgeries and had some back operation and got addicted to pills and stuff. But you know, when he was in his career wrestling, he was not doing that kind of stuff. But so after his career, after they moved him off out of the picture, that they're left to sort of survive on their own. That they got no one there to. You know, Brian Adams was spent a couple of years recovering from his back surgery before he even. You know, that's a lot of lost money that he never made. He's sitting at home, you get depressed, your wife's working, you're not working. There's a lot of, you know, there's a pattern there with all these wrestlers that are dying. And it all relates back to, like Kirk was saying about the schedule and how hard it was working. I worked, on average, 300 days a year for 14 years, straight, every year, day in, day out.
Double shots on
Christmas Day, Easter, Thanksgiving, birthday parties. It didn't matter what you were missing at home. If your wife was having a baby or whatever situation you had wasn't as important as your second match in Orlando with Lanny Poffel. You know, some things just take precedence. That's the life of a wrestler, unfortunately.
Hey Brett, my son wants to know, when did you came into wrestling? What year?
As soon as I came up.
I was just born in.
Yeah, pretty much. So I hit the mat.
He also wants to know how do you feel about Shawn Michaels right now?
How do I feel about Shawn Michaels?
He's a hack.
He's injured.
I don't know. I hope he feels good when he looks in the mirror.
He's losing his hair, especially when the last
Of all the places you've been, which promoter did you like working for the most?
Kirk White was always. I actually didn't work for very many promoters. I worked for Inoki in Japan. I worked for a couple guys in Germany and England. I worked for my dad. I worked for Vince McMahon. And I guess I sort of worked for WCW, if you call that working. I never had any problems with most of the promoters I worked with. Even Vince, you know, the truth about Vince is that I always kind of knew what Vince was like, even from the very first day that I worked for him. I knew like that he was pretty, you know, I knew he was sort of a genius in a lot of ways, but and the guy that was going to take wrestling in a new direction. But I also knew he was a guy that was very ruthless and would do anything to win. And so in the end, when everything happened with me and Vince, I can at least say, okay, at least you know, it's not like I didn't, you know, I always knew what Vince was all about, and whatever happened, happened. But I mean, it shouldn't be a big surprise to me, and it really isn't if you think about it.
Of all the guys that you've wrestled with, who is the most dangerous or reckless wrestler in your opinion?
Well, Leon White, Vader was no picnic. Goldberg was no fun either.
Yeah.
That would be the top ones that come to mind. There was no rush to work with Long or Michaels. Feel free to ask more questions.
Hey, Bret, have you ever thought about taking Stampede Wrestling and bringing it back into Calgary and bringing yourself in as the promoter like your dad did?
Yeah, I'm just waiting to win the lottery first. Maybe I win the lottery, I'll open up Mountain Wrestling. Hello?
When was the last time you talked to Dynamite Kid?
Been a long time, I think. 2000, year 2000 maybe. Just after Old Man, maybe.
Speaking of the Stampede Wrestling promotion, do you think, have you been thinking about possibly coming back as a booker or a writer for another company like TNA Wrestling since they need it so badly?
No, I'm not really looking for a job in wrestling right now. Working for TNA or working for WWE or even any kind of wrestling outfit is going to be, it's going to be so many days a week. Like TNA would have to be on the road all the time, but I'd still have to work 3 days a week. I'd have to be there for the TV show, and I'd have to fly in the day before, and have to fly in the day after. So that's 3 days of my week that I gotta be tied down to wrestling, and I'd rather be here doing Kirk stuff.
Bret, this is a quick two-parter. You traveled the world throughout your career and saw a lot of amazing places. Where did you think had the greatest fans, and also what country had the most beautiful women?
Well, that's a really loaded question. That kid should get little silver stars for best questions. Best fans in the world? You'd have a hard time. There's so many different kinds of fans. Like Japanese fans are so passionate. For me, Germany was unbelievable when I was there. England had great fans. Like if you look at Wembley, I always think when you've watched that Bulldog match I had with Bulldog at Wembley, it's just watching the fans is the most interesting thing because they loved their wrestling. They loved every bit of it. It was two baby faces wrestling in one of those long, boring matches which people tend not to like watching. Yet they were riveted to every move, and it was like, for most people, it was like one of the great matches of all time. And just looking at the audience and knowing the ages and all the diversity in the audience and how passionate that whole 82,000 fans was always pretty special to me. But also, in saying that, the best wrestling fans in the world will probably have to be here in America. Yeah. There would be no pro wrestling the way it is today if it wasn't for American wrestling fans. They're the ones that revived and saved wrestling, going back to the 80s when Vince took it over. I mean, wrestling was something that has a kind of a hidden history. The thing I always noticed about wrestling was that you wrestle in some of these cities like Montreal or New York or Toronto or Los Angeles or even San Francisco. And there was already a history there for years, like 50, 60, 70, 80 years of pro wrestling history, maybe more than that. So there's a lot of history and a lot of fans that watched over a long period of time and that made wrestling what it is. And like when I wrestled in Germany years ago, the European wrestling, in contrast, compared from an entertainment and excitement standpoint, even Japan, American wrestling has always been the coolest wrestling in the world. Way more cool than the British wrestling or the Japanese wrestling. It was always way more entertaining, and that's why it's stronger here and stronger around the world now. And it's not like we're all watching Japanese style wrestling today. They're watching American style wrestling. So I would say that American wrestling fans are the best.